You're with Clement Manyathela.
702.
Right now, we start our conversation with Fundi Sithebe, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Sizekhaya Holdings. This is the new operator for the National Lottery, and she's joining us in studio. As you know, this will be I think the fourth, if I'm not mistaken, operator of the South African National Lottery. It will be an enormous responsibility to run what we really consider a national treasure. So how do they plan to do things? What changes are they thinking about? And I want to know from you as well, and I'm sure they would also want to hear from you, what you think has worked and what you think could be changed. How can they improve the National Lottery? You can join this conversation by calling us on 011-883-0702 or send us a WhatsApp on 072-702-1702. Fundi, welcome to the show. Good morning.
Top of the morning, Clement. Thank you for having me.
Have you guys been sleeping? I mean, the 1st of June is slowly approaching.
It's not slowly. It's 82 days away, Clement. So sleep is overrated at this point in time because there are literally so many moving parts to ensuring a very successful and seamless transition on the 1st of June. From a systems, processes, people, we've been busy. We continue to be busy up until that last day.
Okay, let's just start from the beginning for listeners who may not be aware how Sizekhaya came about. Just walk us through how the consortium was put together and what gave you the confidence to go after a contract of this magnitude.
So I think maybe the story probably began about 3-4 years ago. So obviously a tender of this magnitude requires time, and it requires, a concerted effort by the NLC to put it down into paper and to really put down what the requirements are for people to respond to. So the consortium led by Gold Rush Holdings or Gold Rush Group, which is a listed entity that has been in the gaming sector in South Africa for many, many years. So they led the consortium, bringing in the different elements. And I think what's important is when Gold Rush was at the stages of putting this bid together, it was very important for them, apart from obviously putting a value proposition that is compelling, but really put together the strongest team possible. So in terms of the shareholding of Sizekhaya, in terms of the consortium, 50% is Gold Rush. And then there's a couple of, smaller entities or, other shareholders that range between 10%, 7%. But I think what's also incredibly important, Clement, was there was a concerted effort to ensure that we're also including shareholders that have never been in the space before, but they bring different aspects. So we've got chartered accountants, we've got young black professionals as some of these shareholders within Sizekhaya, and collectively we really believe that the strengths that everybody puts together and brings to the table are what really made us a compelling choice for the NLC as Sizekhaya itself. We'll still get into the products and some of the innovations, but at the core it had to be the right people at the right time, putting together the right value proposition, the right product for South Africa.
So what can you maybe also help us understand, like the operational checklist, if you will? I imagine there's legislation you need to be aligned with. You spoke about other systems, machines. I think I read somewhere that have you worked with a Chinese company to help with? So there's a lot that's going on. What's the operational checklist before we get to the 1st of June?
So the operational checklist, Clement, essentially started when the award was given to us. And that is because the NLC, being the regulator, and because the NLC are the ones who hold us accountable to those license conditions, we had to have, project milestones that gave them the comfort that come 1 June. As I said, it's not as if you just switch on the lights on 1 June. There's a whole lot of things that go into the background. So we had those license conditions that we had to adhere to, non-negotiables. So at a very, very kind of high level, we had to obviously speak to the systems. They were already in the tender in our bid process, but the NLC needed confirmation and comfort around the fact that, our partnering with Genlot in China, which is the biggest sort of technology partner for the largest lottery in China, right? So it's no small player in the system. So that's who's doing our back end, our systems side of it. So what they are running is what's called the CGS, the Central Gaming System, where all, your numbers are kind of generated and where you play as a player. That's the system you interact with. Equally, they also helped us with the lottery terminals. We've got a number of new terminals, that are, kind of aimed at ensuring that what we aimed to deliver from an innovation, from a games perspective, that it's the right machines, it's the right terminals. And obviously, with the passage of time, they have to be relevant and extremely user-friendly. So they helped us with that. But over and above that, you've got responsible gaming that you have to adhere to. You've got the codes of good practice. You have to go out and start to interact with the retailers. And here, the tricky part, Clement, is the retailers are currently obviously dealing with the current incumbent, the operator. So you're almost running a parallel system where the retailers are saying, guys, we're still running this system and we're still running the lottery to the best of our abilities with the operator at hand now. But then we come and we say, hang on, there will be this change. So we need to start thinking about a very smooth parallel process in which we walk this journey through with you, start to implement some of the systems, start to train you so that you have an understanding of what's going to be different.
Yeah.
So like I say, multifacets of things that have been happening, the cogs in the wheel, but a very, very interesting piece of machinery.
Okay, and the big question in our listeners' minds is, how are you going to be different to how Ituba has been running the National Lottery? I know as Sizekhaya, you've spoken about expanding the accessibility through banking apps, retail, terminals, handheld devices. You're promising more frequent jackpots. How will the day-to-day lottery experience actually change for ordinary South Africans?
So let me break it down into two categories. There's obviously the channels in terms of how each player will interact with the product. And as you rightly say, we have signed up a lot more retailers than we had before. So already that typical bricks and mortar model is expanding. You'll start to see more lottery terminals in a lot more retail stores, whether it's the big chains or some of the independent or some of the smaller stores. So I think that's the first thing that's important. So greater accessibility. But I think what's also important, you've mentioned that, we call it the B2B channels on the banking app. We have brought in more banks that we partnered with. There was a X amount currently, but now we've increased that number of banks that will be carrying the lottery product on their platform or on their app. So that's incredibly exciting as well. We have handheld devices that, as part of our partnership with Genlot in China, who have a subsidiary, Genlot SA. And that was, by the way, I pause on that. That was also deliberate, that the money that is generated within South Africa stays within South Africa. So that was a big part of our strategy of localization. So whilst we use Genlot China, there's a Genlot SA, and everything then is kind of operated. And that's a first in South African history, because all along, a lot of the technology partners were taking money out of the country and going into kind of, let's say, the host country. So from a channel perspective, we have these handheld devices that are going to be available in, the rural areas, the township areas, because some of the stores might not necessarily have the space to put in a big terminal. So we've definitely made it a lot more accessible and a lot more easier for people to access. So that's on the channel front. Then obviously from a product perspective, I think we're going to need another hour. Some really, really amazing innovations around that, Clement. But what I can say is, previously you'd see a lot long queues in the retail stores. People are there, numbers, etc. So what we've done is we've brought in a new innovation with the QR code of a data-free site. So if you as Clement want to either pick your numbers and then just go and scan and then get your coupon generated, you can now. You don't have to be standing at the till. And secondly, if you want to check your numbers, because that also takes time. You have a ticket, you're not sure if you've won, you're not sure, these are the numbers. Instead of giving the ticket, you still can to the teller. We've also made it easily available. And the journey now sits a lot with the consumer, with the player. You can now scan your ticket on a QR code and immediately you'll know if you've got a winner or you don't have a winner. So we're starting to just deal with some of those headaches in terms of traffic, in terms of, long queues. And over and above that, yes, I think the jackpot is a very, very, very important part of this, because we play to win the jackpot. And currently at this point in time, you see what's called jackpot fatigue. We've gone for weeks. The jackpot gets bigger, but it just keeps on rolling over and rolling over. And some of the innovations that we've put forward is cascading that jackpot so that we start to make it more meaningful, more frequently. And players can start to feel that this is actually attainable. We've also played around with some of the odds. I can't go into the details around that, but we've decreased the odds and making sure that at least it's a little bit more attainable than it was. And that's the mechanism of the game design that we truly took time in putting together. So channel, product, exciting, and of course, last but not least, the live lotto draws coming back on screen. It was important for us to bring that just to show the transparency, apart from the fact that it's such a, South African tradition sitting around, the TV
how long has
watching.
it been now that it hasn't been around? It's been quite a while.
I think even before COVID, right?
Yeah, before.
And what that did, Clement, was I guess consumers started doubting to a certain extent the transparency. Are there people sitting in some dark corner spewing out numbers? And we're saying that's actually not the case. There's a number of systems, and we're bringing back that live lottery draw for the excitement, but most importantly, education and transparency to show the South African players that, this is something that's very attainable, and it's a system with checks and balances that is for the South African player.
That's exciting. I know there was a lot of debate in recent years from people who play the lotto, especially on social media, who've been calling for those live broadcasts to come back to, as you say, increase that issue of transparency. Let's talk about responsible play. I mean, about the proliferation of online gambling and how that has wrecked societies. As Sizekhaya, how much of what you do is also influenced by the need to ensure there is responsible play and you take that responsibility seriously?
And I guess in the context of where we are as South Africans, Clement, it's such a pivotal perspective, right? Responsible play and ensuring that people are not over indebted and people are just not getting into trouble. So from our perspective, I think from responsible play is embedded in operations. So the typical standard, not for sale to pay, persons under the age of 18. So we really work with our retailers in making sure that when somebody comes to the counter, retailer or the teller, you have the right to ask for age, you have age verification, etc. But I think also over and above that, we've got, the support channels that have to be in place. If you feel that you have a problem, we have that responsible play helpline that you can reach out to. But I think what's important, because we are also emphasizing on omni-channel. So part of what we're building is a value proposition, digital value proposition, right? To say that you can also play on the app, that the lottery app that we're going to have. And inside there as well, there's checks and balances. For example, right now, when you try and play the lottery on a banking app, there's cutoff times, right? And I think we're the only ones as the lottery that have that have those checks and balances. So we're going to continue with that. Over and above that, even with our own app, we're putting in checks and balances that say, hang on, Clement has been playing for 5 hours nonstop. Let's put in a mechanism that warns him, and that then starts to make him aware that continuously you could be finding yourself in a problem. So there are a number of those. But over and above that, we have to subscribe to the National Lotteries Act. And as the NLC being the custodian of that, like I say, checks and balances, they equally hold us accountable in terms of those stats and making sure that the health of the player is always at the core of what we offer.
Yeah. I want to, and by the way, I see your questions coming through. We'll get to them after the headlines, I promise. I just want to take out some of the key questions I have for Fundi, and then she's all yours. So you can call us on 011-883-0702 if you've got questions or some inputs or some suggestions for the new operator of the National Lottery. You can also send your WhatsApps on 072-702-1702. I want to talk a little bit about the contributions to the National Lottery Distribution Trust Fund. What is your thinking as Sizekhaya around that, especially because there's been a lot of reports, disturbing ones, about how money that was intended to benefit communities didn't end up benefiting communities? What checks and balances then do you put in place so that people who are playing the lotto know that actually that money goes to like good causes. They're changing lives, and it's not going to people that are politically connected or connected to people who are running the foundation.
So maybe let me also answer it on two facets, right? Let me just start with the pure numbers. So if you as a player purchase a ticket of 100 rands, we must break down how that 100 rands is spent or distributed, right? So already of that 100 rands, 25% is ring fenced and already goes into the good causes. And I'll get into the distribution of that. Of that, we then take 50 to 53%. So 50 rands to 53 rands of that has to go into a pool, because that's how the jackpot is made up of, right? So we put that into, let's call it the jackpot pool. The retailers that are currently selling our lottery products are entitled to a 6% commission. So 6 rands of that must go to the retailers for their effort, for their space, etc. And then lastly, operating costs, which are between 15 to 18%, that go to Sizekhaya to ensure that the systems are, in place, that the lottery continuously is running transparently, efficiently, etc. Like any business has an operating cost. So 15 to 18 rands of that then comes through to us. And then obviously tax being 1%. So already that gives you a feel of how that's broken down. And I needed to just take us through that breakdown, because then at the end of the day, then it then becomes, well, what then happens of the 25 rands, Fundi, that you've mentioned of the good causes? So what then happens, we as an operator legislatively are required to take that through to the NLC and then to the NLDTF. The NLDTF and the NLC are constructed or are the ambit of the Minister of Trade and Industry. So he or, is the one that appoints, and within that constitution of that board and the trust and the NLC, the good causes are therefore distributed from there. So right now we know that the lottery is South Africa's largest philanthropic contributor. So, and I'm not going to sit here and be naive and say it hasn't been a problem. It has been a problem, and South Africans have the right to feel that that something was wrong with the system. But having been involved in the lottery, over the last year or so, just kind of, they've done a lot of work. The SIU, all that investigation, I think, is starting to clear a little bit some of the processes and ensure that the checks and balances are in place. There's, the commissioner at the NLC has done a superb job with her team in really ensuring that those trust, the trust is built again, the checks and balances. But that is purely the ambit of the NLC and the NLDTF.
Which separates you as Sizekhaya. Just explain though, because now I'm getting confused. NLC, the difference between their NLC and NLDTF? Isn't that the same thing?
It is, but it isn't.
Okay.
So the NLC is an agency of the DTI, right?
Okay.
So they are the ones that make sure that day to day we are responsible, held accountable, and make sure, that they are entrusted as, part of the country's mandate to ensure that we have a clear, very, very good lottery that's running. And then you've got the NLDTF, which is I forgot what the acronym stands for, but they are the one that they distribute. That's the trust fund that distributes on behalf of the NLC. So whilst NLC, let's call it, to lack of a better word, collects, they then pass on the money to the NLDTF. And the NLDTF is then the ones that then, contribute or distribute for sports, arts, culture, etc., all those good causes.
Yeah. Are there still any legal issues on your table? I know that there was a court ruling that came up and said government can't really extend Ituba's contract by another 12 months. But do you have any legal issues to still sort out before the 1st of June, or that's been dealt with, it's out of the wind?
It'll continue. As you started in your preamble to say this is the 4th license, every single license that's been awarded has always gone into litigation. So I think it would be naive of us to say that we didn't expect it. But like I say, really emboldened by the fact that we know that our value proposition was a good and excellent, value proposition. However, there is a current court challenge that's before us and that we are, kind of taking part in. Ituba obviously took the whole process under review. So what sat last year in November was the urgent part of the application. which didn't succeed, and it was not awarded to YouTube in terms of urgency, with costs, by the way. So now what remains is the review application that is still to be sat down. We will continue. We continue because, like I say, 82 days until the 1st of June. We won't be deterred. And at this point in time, we have to go through the motions, but we're comfortable and we're confident on our case that it's business and it's all systems go for us on the 1st of June. So that's the big one, I guess, that's sitting in front of us.
All right. 011-883-0702. That's the number to dial. You can send your WhatsApps as well on 0727021702. We've been in conversation this hour with Fundi Sithebe, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Sizekhaya Holdings, the new operator of the National Lottery. What are your questions? What are your inputs? All of that coming up after the headlines.
702.
The Clement Manyathela Show.
Let's walk the talk.
It's 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. From the 1st of June, it's not going to be Ituba that operates the National Lottery. It's going to be Sizekhaya. And we're speaking to the Chief Operating Officer, Fundi Sithebe, this morning. What questions do you have? What inputs do you have? What changes would you like to see? I'm taking your calls and your WhatsApp voice notes. So let's start here.
Morning, Madikmecha. Can you ask how are they going to deal with this thing that the machines are offline? Because often when you go there, the machines are offline. So I'm asking the question, how are they going to deal with that?
Hi, I'd like to know, I'm working outside the country in Malawi. On my Capitec banking app, I could play a lottery, but not outside of South Africa. So if I try, it just says, sorry, I can't remember what it says, but anyway, I can't play outside of South Africa. And yet my one colleague from South Africa who's got an ABSA account, an ABSA banking app, he can play lottery. So is that something to do with the banks? Or, just wondering. Dave.
Hi, Clement. I say I'm anonymous. Ask the lady if they're going to bring the scratch tickets because people used to win, breakfast money with the scratch tickets, Yeah, because this rolling balls, it's not working for a lot of people. So the scratch cards, like overseas, I think they can do better for some people, who hasn't got money. Maybe they can win 200 rands, 500, from the scratch cards. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Let's start with this group of questions, Fundi.
Okay, let me start with the last one because that's an exciting one. Of course, scratch cards are coming back.
Oh, nice.
Part of the reason we realized that in terms of, different player requirements, different personas of players, that the scratch card was probably something that was missing because it's instantaneous and it's low value, but with potentially high wins. And a lot more regular than a jackpot. So those are definitely coming back, and those will be offered both online and within our retail environment as well. So yes, definitely coming back. Then let me go to the gentleman outside of the country. So let me answer it from this perspective. The South African lottery is for people within South Africa, right? So obviously there have to be checks and balances to ensure that we don't have people. They may be South African, they may not be South African, who are not inside the borders of South Africa. So there have to be those checks and balances to be able to, to play. So I can sit here firmly and say that you shouldn't be able to be playing the lottery outside of the South African borders because now you're touching on different legislation, other countries. So it shouldn't be allowed. But it may also just come down to a bank-to-bank risk. Model. So, if ABSA, I'm not sure if ABSA versus Capitec, he'd have to check with his bank. And then finally, offline machines that Marimecha raises. Very, very valid point because I think, one, because of the technology, but also just the cell phone infrastructure and the network infrastructure, there has been those problems. But what we've done as part of our offering with, like I said, Genlot SA, and some of the partners that we've got what we call next generation multi-network SIM technology. So within these machines, We put in the routers, we put in SIM cards that are able to just pick up the strongest network at the time. So it's not necessarily confined to a particular network provider. And if that network provider isn't strong, then it's not working. So we've learned a lot from, previous kind of learnings, and we've instituted into that. So there definitely will be that multi-dimensional SIM, but also I think that the communications technology that we're putting in from the get-go is a lot more modern, is a lot more agile, and speaks to the South African context of different infrastructure, different availabilities. Like I said earlier on, we want our rural customers to be able to play, to be able to access. Those handheld devices must be able to work. And of course, that means that we have to then bolster that with a very, very reliable comms infrastructure.
Okay, here's some more WhatsApp voice notes.
Hi, Clement. Can you ask the lady about manual draw? Can they bring back manual draw, please? This thing of electronic draw, we don't trust it. Can they bring manual so that it's fair?
Morning, Clement. Ask your guest if they cannot put the smaller amounts, the one in the Powerball, 2 in the Powerball, or 3 numbers, into a bit of a bigger payout scale. At least if somebody plays a 15 or a 20 rand ticket, they get their money back instead of playing a 35 rand ticket and getting back 10 rand. It'll entice people to play a lot more. Just my point of view.
Hi, Clement and the team. Your guest said they will add more retail outlets. Don't you think that a penetration strategy can end up promoting irresponsible gambling? David.
Thank you so much, Fundi.
Okay. So it's interesting. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. The guest asked about a manual draw. And we are saying that it's precisely that kind of perspective that people felt that it wasn't fair, that it was a draw somewhere in the background that's happening. So hence I emphasize that the live lottery draws are coming back. But I think what we need to also note is there's no lottery international best practice that runs manually, right? So we are instituting best practice. But I also need to emphasize to him that there are checks and balances. So earlier on we spoke about the central gaming system. That's where you go and you choose your numbers. Over and above that, the system that we use to draw the numbers, it's called an RNG system, random number generating system. That's an independent system altogether that will then pull the winning numbers, let's call it. And then on top of that, you've got what's called an IVS, independent verification system, that then looks at these numbers did exist on the central gaming system, and this is what was chosen then through the random number generation, and therefore we can then verify that it's true and it's accurate. So there are checks and balances, and we need to take the players on us on this journey. But I can definitely say to the player, there will be no manual draws. There are no manual draws that are being done, and precisely because we want to safeguard the integrity of the lottery product. Because once you start having manual, it's human interaction. It's human. We're just human beings, and there could be mistakes or whatever the case may be. So we're really wanting to move against that. Hence the 3 systems that are critically important.
Yeah.
I think there was the question, if I understood it correctly, Clement, is around the bigger pay, fixed payouts. So part of what we have introduced, and we will obviously start introducing the awareness probably within a month, so that players are aware. So I can guarantee that there is not only a cascading jackpot that we've got, so that when I said frequent jackpots, so if it hasn't been won by a certain time, then we cascade it. And, if you had played your 6 numbers and the 6 numbers weren't won, we then force it down 5 numbers, etc. So some of those things are in play. But over and above that, we've also played around with, how do we ensure that even with your 3 numbers that, you can still potentially win? And that's part of some of the gaming innovation that we've got. So I can confirm that that's definitely coming. And then in time, we'll then take time to kind of take the players along that journey.
Yeah. And then someone else spoke about adding more retail outlets.
That's already done. So definitely the bigger retailer footprint, the banks that we've spoken about,
Yes.
etc. But I think what he mentioned was this penetration strategy.
Yes.
How do we avoid irresponsible gaming?
Yeah.
Right. And we alluded to it earlier on. So there are also limits within the system. So I can't go and decide that I want to buy tickets for 200,000 for the lottery. There's a system, checks and balances that will immediately stop you. So the number of times and the amount is capped that a player can obviously play. And we're saying that, over and above the responsible gaming that we adhere to, the codes of good practice that we have to adhere to, we think that we've got at least a really strong backbone to start to curb some of that irresponsible gaming.
Pat, you calling us from Pretoria. Good morning.
Hello. Good
Hi,
morning.
Pat. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
What safety measures are they going to put into place to ensure that big amount winners like jackpot winners, if they don't claim, right now what's happening is if jackpot winner doesn't claim, he's not aware that he's won, lotteries place an advert to inform the winner to claim. That's not safe. I mean, we live in a country where there's a lot of kidnappings and extortions. So what are they going to do to make sure that it's automatic? If I play, I win a jackpot, the message that I've won must come directly to me, and me alone would know that I've won because of I've been alerted by a particular application. So this is meant to safeguard the jackpot winners. Right now, there's this advert that they place, and secrets are easy to pass, especially within lottery itself. It hasn't done itself a great deal of good because of the corruption that is happening within the system of lotteries board.
Yeah, got it. Pat in Pretoria, thank you for that question. Fundi?
So there definitely is a method if we break it down. So if Pat, for example, plays online with his bank will get in touch with him. All right, they'll call him to say, Mr. Pat, you are a winner. Please make your way to a center. Where in that center you're dealt with anonymity, that word, yes. Anonymous.
Yes.
And you don't have to disclose at all. You, as the person, have the power and the right to say, I want to disclose or I don't want to disclose. And we cannot force you otherwise. So that's the first. Second thing, obviously online as well. If you, as a player, have access to your online app, and it's only you that has access to it, there'll be a notification and a similar process kicks in that, you've won an X amount, and we will then be in touch with you about how you then get your winnings. But never at any time do we announce that so-and-so has won unless you decide that you want to announce. It's not for us to announce. And then lastly, I think the place where a lot of this kind of sits is, if you've gone into a retail and you've bought a physical ticket, right? We obviously have to announce the winning numbers because people must know if they've won or they haven't won. But we never at any stage reveal that, there's a winner, there's two winners. We never at any stage say that this, we just say there is a winner. And it's incumbent on you to check your ticket to say, okay, I potentially could be that winner. Then you come into our offices, and within our own offices, Clement, we deal with winners in a very anonymous culture. So you come in, we already put you into, a winner's lounge where it is secure, it is in confidence, and we then go through the process with you because obviously we've got a vet that's a winning ticket, it's not fraudulent, and there have to be some supporting services around that, around how you handle your money, financial counseling. So that whole process is also part of what we've put together. But I can assure the listener that, there's never been a time, or we don't intend on putting people's names out there. We can't do that. It's simply not, it's not legal.
Okay. I've got some WhatsApps that have come through here as well. Anonymous says, hi Clement, has just joined this conversation. Can you please ask Fundi why are we getting charged a fee when we play through these banking apps? While it's free, for instance, on the Ituba app. So that's a question about the bank fees. And then another person says, Clement, are the lottery numbers going to be increased? I think it's something we touched on earlier on. And then another person says, Clement, I know the lottery is in good hands because Fundi is there. She's a maverick. A Marvel learned of her when she made horse racing cool again in Johannesburg. Happy for the new lottery team. Get in there. That's a message there from Len. There's also a question we've been getting around, and I know you've dealt with this as an organization, the allegations that came linking Sizekhaya to the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile. Are you worried about how that somehow puts the credibility of the organization at risk? How have you dealt with it?
Once again, I think within the context of everything that's happening in South Africa, we can't be numb to the noise, right? But I can confidently say that at the beginning I said this took an incredible amount of time, energy, resource, thinking. And if we had any doubt about shareholding and about any potential risks around that shareholding, I don't think that we would have gotten to this point. So I can definitely confirm that, according to the National Lotteries Act of 1997, which is very clear about defining politically exposed, political involvement, that we've crossed that, we've crossed that bridge and we've passed that test, which is very important. So I can assure South Africans at large that we are in no way politically tainted, politically favored, and we truly believe that this was at the back of a strong, very, very strong and excellent value proposition that we put forward. I've spoken about the team, I've spoken about the innovations, I've spoken to, a lot of what we put on paper. And that's what we fundamentally believe. So we don't for one second believe that there was any favor from political favor. But more than that, we stuck to the National Lotteries Act. We adhered to it and we've passed that test, clear and square.
There was a question about banking fees. Do you have control over that?
We don't. We don't, unfortunately. And whilst I don't necessarily want to speak for banks, I'm assuming that obviously banks need to have their own processes and systems, right, to be able to integrate, to be able to offer this. So I'm assuming that will be part of the cost. Like I said earlier on, remember the retailers also charge us a commission for selling the ticket. So whilst you may not see it when you buy your ticket at the retailer, but we are obviously adhere and we have to pay for that cost. So there definitely has to be a cost that has to be incurred, and I'm sure that's what the banks are doing.
Okay, Ryan, you are in Randburg. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Clement and your guest. Apologies, I didn't get the name. I just joined the conversation a few minutes ago. Hi, Fundi. Yes, thanks. So I was just wondering how you looking to advise your winners going forward once you do become the national operator. I'm a financial advisor, and I've always been extremely concerned about, people who win hundreds of millions or tens of millions of rands who've never had proper financial advice. I know that you're not really able to force them to do that, but from what I understand, the current system, there are a list of some sort of financial advisors that, your winners are referred to, and I'm just wondering what your guys' system is going to look like.
Thank you, Ryan in Randburg. Fundi?
Thanks very much. And Ryan is right. We always speak about the bad stories of, somebody wins the lottery and then they end up on I blew it. And really we want to start to debunk some of those, And Ryan is absolutely spot on. We cannot force somebody who's won to be bound to financial advice and financial counseling. But we, as part of our license condition, we have to offer it. So I mentioned earlier on that if you happen to be a winner and you come in through to our office, as part of that process of confirming that you are the winner, a legit ticket, there is automatic financial advice and financial counseling that is given to you. We have to by law. And so we are comfortable that baseline is there, that offering is there. But at the end of the day, we're human beings, we're adults, and each will decide how they want to spend their money. But it's always unfortunate that, we find ourselves in those narratives of I blew it. And part of what we want to do is part of the education and the journey is to start to, impact some of those stories in some way or other.
Some WhatsApps, 072-702-1702.
Hi, good morning, Clement. Please ask your guest, what guarantee do we have that we won't have a situation where the lottery is rigged or set to be rigged in inverted commas, as we have seen with our previous or the current incumbent? What guarantees do we have that will not happen again with them? Thanks.
Hi, Clement. Will they still be investing in the arts similar to like the UK lottery, like films, plays, and that kind of thing?
Good morning, Clement, and good morning to your 702 listeners. Can you just please ask your guest in the studio if they could put a QR code on their ticket that they issue to us, so that we can just use our phones to just immediately scan the ticket and see the results for ourselves. This thing of having going to the shops or logging on to the internet to check results is quite tedious sometimes. If they just include a QR code on their tickets, we scan, we win, then we collect our 10 million. This is Eugene from Soshanguve.
Eugene, 10 million, hey? Okay, Fundi, of course you've touched on some of these issues and questions being asked, but for the benefit of our listeners who may have just only joined the conversation, please, if you can re-emphasize them.
Absolutely, Eugene. We don't want to stand in the way of you and your 10 million rands winnings. So there definitely will be an opportunity for you to scan your QR code. Once again, it brings back that experience back into your hands, back into your control, and you're able to check it as and when you'd like to check on that. So that function is definitely going to be enabled, a first in South Africa, and I think it's actually a first even around the world. So we're very proud of that innovation. Then there was a question around the NLDTF. Will there still be funding given to sports, films, etc.? Like I said, the NLDTF is a separate structure, and they go through a process of applications, etc., where they vet, and they are the final determinants of where those funds are distributed to. What I can tell with confidence, like I said before, that the 20 to 25% good cause allocation from Sizekhaya is there, and part of what we think was a compelling value proposition was that increase from what it currently is and what it's going to be, which means that there should be more money going around for better causes, etc. So at the end of the day, really, South Africa's lottery ensures that we keep on winning as South Africans, one way or the other. And then there was a question around, is it rigged? And like I said earlier on, there are three systems that are independent of each other that make sure that the checks and balances. So it's the central gaming system, random number generation, and your IVS, your independent verification system. So I sit here and I say, as Sizekhaya, that the system is not rigged. The system is purely designed to be so independent that it's also audited by the NLC. We have to keep our results for a certain amount of time that can be, verified, re-verified, etc. So there's very, very little room, if any, for it to be rigged. And part of what we want to do with the lottery show is to bring that transparency back, where you see the numbers for yourselves and you see that, okay, nobody is messing, nobody's sitting in a corner. And part of that is really bringing the confidence back in the lottery and the transparency. So those are the methods that we've put in place.
Yeah, in fact, speaking of transparency and confidence, Xolela says on the WhatsApp text, Clement, ask your guest if they are in any way considering live games to restore the credibility and transparency of the National Lottery. Xolela, Fundi touched on that earlier. That is coming back, the live lotto draws. And then Misu is joking on Twitter, says, Clement, ask her not to give financial counseling to the winners so we can continue to enjoy I blew it. No, Misu. We want them to grow it. How about I grew it? And then Matlodi says, Clement, this is not Matlodi, Lindy says, Clement, please ask them, how are they going to assure the public that the draws are not rigged? You've already answered that. And then another question is, how are the players are going to be updated on the good causes that the lottery is supposed to fund? Is that the plan? To tell more of the stories of where this money ends up?
I think it's important. I think it's a very important part because, like we say, it restores the confidence, again, to the South Africans, but also to the NLDTF. And part of what we are aiming to do as Sizekhaya, like I said, we're the operator. The funds are distributed by the NLTTF, but how do we work together to ensure that there's good stories? Like you say, I love it. I grew it. We must emphasize on those stories. We must emphasize that, like I said earlier on, we really take it for granted that the lottery is South Africa's largest philanthropic, a provider. There is no other vehicle. There is no other engine that gives back to South Africa as much as the South African lottery. So we must take the player, the South Africans, on this journey of understanding, what the funds are meant to do, what they're doing. So I think that the responsibility is equally on us as an operator. And some of the work that we'll start to do and to start to showcase perhaps will be around those good stories.
Fundi Sithebe, thank you so much for making time for us. All the best to you and the team at Sizekhaya. Hopefully we'll bring you in as soon as you guys have started.
Thank you. I hope I'm still awake once we started, because it might just come like a brick wall. But thank you so much for having me. This was a great engagement.
It was insightful. Thank you.